Everybody's data is valuable to somebody in some way, and there's economic value that you can attach to it.
Hello and welcome to the FinancialFox, investing and innovation ideas with a twist. I'm your host, Steffi B, and in this episode, I will look at data, today's most valuable asset class. Some, they say, is the new oil or the new gold, or maybe even more. We need access to data for better data models, which can be very useful for science, innovation, progress in healthcare, financial services. But at the same time, we require maximum privacy. We don't want our data to be shared. So what's the solution that guarantees maximum privacy while using those data assets? Let's find out more with our guest today, Bruce Pon, founder of Ocean Protocol, a new blockchain platform that unlocks the value of data, turn data into data assets while preserving full privacy.
The Web3 paradigm, what that allows is A, you own your data, and B, you have 100% transaction history that proves that your data was used exactly in the way that you want it, and you got paid exactly in the way that you want it.
But before we go into the episode, have you got your crypto web domain yet? If not, head over to Unstoppable Domains and secure your blockchain domain name now. You don't have to worry about renewable fees anymore. You pay, you get it, and it's yours forever. Domains are like NFTs, so you can trade them, and they are decentralized, so no one can take them down or hack your data because they are yours. Also, you can add your wallet and get paid or pay somebody in Bitcoin, Ethereum, or 100 plus cryptocurrencies. I have a FinancialFox.crypto and it's really super easy to set it up. There are plenty of new extensions you can choose from. And for example, if you are an artist, you can do .nft. How cool is that? So go to Unstoppable Domain and get your domain now. If you sign up with the link in the description below, you support our channel, and that's amazing. And also, if you want to do a bit more and help us because you love our content and our work, you can make a donation in Ethereum or Bitcoin to FinancialFox.crypto, and we will super appreciate it. Hi, Bruce, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the show. So we are going to be talking about data, and you are working on something really exciting with Ocean Protocol. But before we go into that, do you maybe want to give a little bit about some information about your background and then why you decided to work in the data space? What led you to get into this space? I think that will be very interesting to understand.
Sure. I'm originally from Canada. I've worked in the States, all over Europe and Asia in the past 25 years, first as a consultant and then as an international project manager for automotive. And about 7 years ago, actually, let me take one step back. I used to build banks around the world, Russia, China, Middle East, Southeast Europe, and stuff like that. And as I was going around, I was seeing all these different countries as they're emerging and developing and maturing. And it got me thinking, what is the banking system worth? And how do we make it so that the humanity has a chance when we have AI, robots, and automation coming? So I did a lot of reading and research. And this was around 2013. And as I was doing reading and research, I realized that if you could give people control and ownership of their data, like people have ownership and control of, for instance, their land, then you could give people potentially anywhere on Earth, wherever they are, as long as they have an internet access, some means for economic generation. They can make some money in some way. And so in 2013, I met up with a long-time university colleague, and he said, let's start a blockchain company that focuses on intellectual property and data. And for me, that was very compelling. So I sold my first company and jumped into this project wholeheartedly. And so it's been more than 7 years now that I've been in the blockchain space, focused particularly on data and intellectual property.
Wow, very interesting. But, when you are saying about giving people, the power basically to manage their data, what's the problem about being responsible? So do you think individuals, they have they are, when they are taking this big it's a big job basically to control your data, to manage your data. Is, you know, maybe some people can do it better than others, some others they are not skilled enough. What's like this ethics problem about, can actually manage my data in my best interest and in the best interest of the society as well? I think that's kind of a big issue, I guess.
Absolutely. I think first off, let's agree that everybody's data is valuable to somebody in some way, and there's economic value that you can attach to it. So as that premise, that means that there's a lot of potential that's not being realized because this data isn't, in a way, monetizable. It's not given to the people to control, et cetera. So that's kind of the premise. Number two is, I think with Facebook, we've already seen that when Facebook came out, people started sharing so much information, much more information than they are now comfortable to share, actually. And we learned that there are ways to control the data, and there should be ways that platforms give us to control data. And I think that learning has now come into a certain maturity of thinking, so that if we can give people control of their data, that also means that the user experience needs to be good enough for them to be either easily available to control their data, so that more and more people can do this. Another realization is that most people actually don't care as much. Why? Because they don't really realize how much the value of their data is. And so if we can combine these two things, give people control and comfort in managing their data, and at the same time showing them that it's worth something, I think that you can start changing the mind shift of people. Let's just say, let's be honest, the vast majority don't care right now, into the vast majority eventually do care and take control of their data because they can monetize it.
I think you raised a very interesting point about actually educating people the value of their data and how important they are. So you mentioned Facebook, we have got Google, we have got Amazon. So this big tech giants group, they have a huge power of, everyone data, basically. This has been the model that has established, thanks also to the development of Web3, Web 2, now going into Web 3. How do you think this model is going to change and how it will be disrupted?
So I think that the very first data companies were, in fact, companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon. Now you have other ones like Netflix and Instagram and TikTok and such. So these are essentially data companies, but just dressed up as a specific utility. And I think Web3, what's really interesting about Web3 is this principle that you own your keys, you own your asset. This principle works with Bitcoin, but it also works with anything digital, whether it's NFTs, whether it's data. And not only that, so if people they can actually own their data. What we can also do is we can use the blockchain technology to act as a on-off switch. Do I give access? Under what conditions will somebody be able to access? How much will I ask for in order for somebody to share? And how can I protect my privacy? All of this stuff can actually be built around blockchain technology. And so the Web3 paradigm, what that allows is A, you own your data, and B, you have 100% cryptographically guaranteed transaction history that proves that your data was used exactly in the way that you want it, and you got paid exactly in the way that you want it. And so I think that this changes the paradigm, because for the first time, instead of us using a service like Facebook or Google and just getting the utility of a social network or finding new information, you also, with Web3, have the ability to say, if I give my information for a specific use, I can actually get money back, as well as a certain utility that I get from the service, without giving up the data. It's very nuanced in a way, but it makes it, we believe, this is the whole point of Ocean, we believe that hypothesis can make a huge difference in the change of mindset of people.
So tell me a bit how it's possible to give access to data without penalizing the privacy of the users or the person.
So number one, the data, and we need to actually build infrastructure for this, but the data should be held with people. The people should be their own custodian of their data, as well as their identity, the digital assets, and the NFTs, this type of thing. So assume that you have your own personal data vault. whether it's built on Filecoin technology or Arweave technology, or you even have your own private server somewhere. So that's done. Then you can see Ocean act as this connective tissue that essentially acts as a filter. So you can say, I will make this data available if X, Y, and Z are done. And so that is run by, for instance, Ocean smart contracts. We don't control the Ocean smart contracts. They live on the Ethereum network. And once you invoke the Ocean smart contract, it is decentralized, which means we have no control over that. You have full control based on the conditions that you set and you've kind of essentially pre-programmed in. And that is the way that people can have full transparency on what's happening to their data. Within the smart contract, there's also the ability to invoke privacy preserving modules. We have things that we call compute to data, and we have 4 or 5 other privacy preserving modules that you can say, okay, if you're going to use my data, I don't want it to be exposed. I'm going to sell it for $100. I don't want it to be exposed, but you can still use it by using this compute to data function module or any other module that we will have in our system soon. And what that means is that the algorithm can travel to the data, it can run, and then the only thing that leaves is the result set that comes back to the researcher. And that way your data was never exposed and nothing ever leaked. That's it. It's relatively simple from an execution perspective, but it's really complicated technology in the background. But the idea is that users, all they say is use compute to data, preserve my privacy, pay me this amount of money, and then you can use the information.
So basically, the key is kind of the module, which is determine how the data are going to be used and secured as well. How do you build this module?
So if you want, we can get a little more technical. So for the compute to data module, what that is essentially a Docker container in the environment of the person who owns the data. So they control that environment, but that within that environment, it's actually secured so that if an algorithm travels into that environment and the data travels into that environment, it's protected from all parties. So even the data owner can't see what's in the algorithm and the algorithm owner can't see what's in the data. It runs, you have a cryptographic guarantee that it successfully ran, and the only thing that leaves is a set of numbers from that little Docker container back to the algorithm owner, and then the data, that container just disappears. It gets exploded, and then the data just goes back to where it was. And in that way, the algorithm owner got what they wanted, you got what you wanted in terms of compensation, and both sides knew that their property, their intellectual property, was safe.
Okay, that's a bit more clear. So basically, each person can customize the computer model. Is that correct?
Each person, so it's essentially off the shelf tools. So you can say, I let my data be used under XYZ condition. So only for medical research,
yeah,
and nonprofit. And I also want you to use this module called compute to data. And then on the other side, the researcher says, okay, they're looking for data. And then she says, okay, this data can be consumed. It's what I want. And they require that we use compute to data, and it costs this much to use it. Okay, then she puts the deposit in. The smart contract reads it, says, okay, good, everything is fulfilled on both sides. And then the smart contract invokes. The compute to data function then spins up. The data and the algorithm come together. They run. The result set leaves, goes back to the algorithm owner, and then that capsule just essentially disappears, and everybody has gotten what they wanted.
Okay, so can you explain maybe the proof of authority that I read is a key part of on how the mechanism work?
Actually, proof of authority, since last year, we've sundowned that. The reason being is we had originally had a proof of authority in the Ocean network, which means that we had similar like to EWT or any proof of stake type network where you have either economic or reputational nodes. You either put stake up or you put a certain reputational KYC on there. So let's say it would be Mercedes, Volkswagen, the Automakers Association, Fiat, all of them acting as nodes. So we got rid of that. Why? Because what we realized was that there were a lot of layer 2 solutions that were coming out, like Polkadot, XDAI, Matic, Polygon, Near Protocol, and a whole bunch of others that were going to help scaling, as well as with Ethereum. And so we made this strategic decision saying that we are very good at building the smart contracts for data sharing, acting as that connective tissue. And the layer 2 technology is a different skill set that many people on Earth are working on, and they will eventually get scaling to 10 to 100,000 to a million transactions a second. So we're going to focus only on the data sharing part, and that data sharing smart contract can live on any of these EVM compatible networks, which are proof of stake, proof of authority, or proof of work.
Exactly. Okay, fantastic. That's I think that's a very, very good strategic decision. Talking about the user experience, obviously we want people to don't realize, all these technology things happening in the background. So they should be able just, to don't even feel they have to make a choice on, or some of those decisions, because it can be quite complicated. As we said before, many people don't even understand the value of the data. How are you going to make the user experience so easy that is basically quite, it's very easy to basically onboard new people on your technology?
I think with Web 2, the internet and all these mobile apps and the internet websites and such, we've learned a lot about user experience. We've learned a lot about how people respond, just the entire design of a mobile site or a website. And so that's learnings that we can take into the Web3 world. Where it's a little bit different is this concept of security. You own your keys, you own your assets. And I think that the main areas where people have risk is if they don't understand that model, where they give away maybe their private keys or they give access to other people when they shouldn't. I think that's the main thing, because people are used to a third party acting as a protector, a custodian, a bank. The government protects your identity. You have Facebook protecting your social graph, all that sort of stuff. In the Web3 world, obviously, this is a different paradigm. You protect all your assets. This is one of those fundamental principles that we believe gives power to people. Whether the people are ready for that or we have the proper user experience to kind of show that to them, that is a challenge for the entire space, not just Ocean. But I think that for Ocean, the mental model that is useful is Amazon, very similar. What Amazon did was it made it so that you didn't have only 60,000 titles available, like in a regular big box bookstore. You had 3 million titles available. And what did that do? That opened up this long tail of economic value, where if you wanted some obscure book that was ranked 2.5 million out of the full 3 million that Amazon's catalog has, it was virtually impossible for you to get it. Meanwhile, as the seller of that book, the distribution costs for someone to discover this, and then to get it to that person, maybe across the world, the barriers were way too high. It cost too much. It was too hard to discover. And that's why maybe not as many books were sold. And with Amazon, what they did is they made it so that all 3 million books could be there, so that the other 2.95 million books are available for the world. With Ocean, it's the same thing with data. There is certain data right now that is extremely valuable. Financial data, data for trading, data for health, automotive data that is currently being bought and sold. But what we see is that there are trillions of other data sets available. And the problem is that the barrier to entry to access that data for researchers is too high. The producers don't know where to go. They don't have the distribution channels. The consumers don't know how to find it, and it costs too much. That whole connective tissue is now possible Web3 because we have scalable technology that preserves trust and allows for global distribution. And so if you think about Amazon just making available that 3 million titles, what Ocean is trying to do is make available the trillion data sets that are available so that we can get problem solving, accelerating, and happening a lot faster.
How do you deal with non-genuine requests to access of data?
Explain what you mean by that a little bit more.
So Ocean is allowing some requests of data, right, to run model. How do you make sure that the requests, they are all genuine and there isn't somebody that is just trying to, take some data, but it isn't a genuine request? You know what I mean? Like the other input.
So I think for Web3, the way that you handle that is essentially filtering and having a user experience where people can say for what purposes they allow the data or what purposes they don't allow the data. And that UX has to get more sophisticated over time. So it'll be a rough cut to start with, but then it'll get more and more fine-grained, just like we now have, if you do your Facebook settings, you have 4 or 5 pages of privacy settings. And hopefully that isn't a barrier for people to kind of share their data. In terms of the actual requests for data, the beauty of Web3 is that you want people anywhere on Earth to access your data. You want people who have an interest in that data to be able to use it. And all you need to do is to put the conditions of use there. And from that point on, you don't know the identity. You don't even need to know the identity. You might be curious, you might want to know, and there might be other tools on top that eventually allow us to know, but the whole point of Web3 is that you can have pseudonymous access and transactions with people that you don't even know anywhere on Earth. And so we hold to that principle as the core, and then around it, you can build additional user experience layers, identity layers, KYC layers. I'll use a specific example. Let's say we're doing vaccine development and we need clinical trials from all over the world. I am Pfizer. They want to access data in China, for instance. They don't need to know the individual identities of each person, but they want to have access to data to see how good their vaccine is running. And so what the Ocean protocol eventually can have from a user experience says is, okay, anybody who is Pfizer is able to access the information through, let's say, the Chinese health authorities, and that is kind of the trusted body, and that is the KYC layer. And then you allow the Chinese health authorities to essentially KYC all the people who came into the study. So you don't need to know anybody's DNA. You don't need to know anything. All you do is you have this data set that came from China that is verified. And so that's one way that you can have kind of an identity layer on top of the blockchain. But at the core, each individual's data has been granted to the Chinese health authority, which is then passed on to Pfizer.
Yes, but at the same time, the people, the Chinese people, they still have full privacy of their data because they never disclose their name. Okay, I think that's
correct.
So we mentioned about an example, for instance, with vaccine and healthcare. What about other use cases? For instance, in finance, maybe you mentioned banking before. I think it will be nice to understand how this disruptive technology around data can impact other industries, other sectors.
I think what everybody realizes now is that data is all around. It's being generated every second from every device. We have sensors that track the environment, the lighting, the moving around of people. You have cars that are sensing their entire environments around. We have Alexa and Siri that are listening in. We have the mobile phones which are generating data. So this data, one of the hypotheses with Ocean is that it's useful not just for the company that is collecting it on our behalf, but it's also useful for predicting how the economy is going. It's useful for health to predict your general state of being. It's useful for cities in order to design better environments for citizens. And it's useful for a whole host of other reasons where industries might want to access it, consumer behavior, where are you going, all that sort of stuff. So if we look specifically at finance, typically, what most people don't know is that finance is using a lot of AI data, and they like to use data that other people don't have typically. So this might be obscure, but people who trade and buy shares and do banking and stuff, they already actually have something like AI systems that use satellite imagery to count how many trees are in a certain area, so they can count deforestation. That is useful from a trading perspective. You can use that data for parking lots at Walmart or at the Carrefour. So over the course of a month, you could actually count how many cars are in a parking lot at Carrefour and predict how much revenue Carrefour has generated in that month, and then do predictive models on how their stock price is going to perform, and people trade off this stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff, for instance, with satellite imagery, IoT data. You combine all of that, and then people, the only limitation then becomes, what creative question can you ask that gives you the insight? Because the data is already there. And if you have that insight, then you can essentially make money in the finance industry. But it's also useful, for instance, that data is also particularly useful for the companies themselves to have real-time data on how well are their stores performing. What traffic is there for traffic management for the city? Is there traffic jams? Is there peak times? All that sort of stuff. Infinite use cases. Essentially, it's kickstarting a new data economy that allows for us to run more efficiently, use less resources, and also solve some of the big problems that are facing us.
How big is the data economy right now?
I think McKinsey estimated that it should be 13 trillion by 2030. But the problem with the data economy is that it's relatively intransparent. The players, they don't explain what they're doing. Most people don't understand it. We don't have this education of what the data economy is. We have an initial idea because of the release from Edward Snowden that everybody's collecting data on us, Facebook as well, Google, all these people. We have an idea of it, but there isn't a number that's been put around the entire data economy yet. And part of what we want in Web3 not only is to give people back control of their data, but to essentially bring this data economy to light so that when there's transaction volume on the blockchain, that is irrefutable. We know that transaction volume happens. And in that way, you're going to be able to start putting a number on the data economy.
Here is a challenge. What do you see the role of governments here, or CIS? I mean, it's kind of like tricky to see how they are going to take that, because we are empowering really people when sometimes their game is actually to don't tell us how things are, really.
I think with governments, a very challenging situation for them. Number one, as a rules maker and a referee, that is an essential role of government. And to stay focused on the fundamental human rights of owning your data and being able to monetize it, and then penalizing those companies that abuse that right. But if you go into more detail, that's where it starts getting more complicated for them, because unfortunately, the technology is working at a clock speed that is so fast that it's really, really hard for the governments to keep up. So where, for instance, blockchain has moved in 10 years, it has essentially shocked and awed most governments. And what they can do is they can pick out certain players to penalize if they think that they've done something wrong. But the question is, are those companies actually doing something wrong per se, or are they opening up economic opportunities? I can use an example of Binance. It's a little bit off topic, but right now it seems like the regulatory authorities in the US, Cayman Islands, in Singapore, a couple other, the UK actually, I think these are the four ones that I've heard of in the last 2 weeks that have said, we're going to investigate Binance. The question is, has Binance done anything wrong? And I personally think that they've made crypto available to people all over the world. And I believe that's a service. But in many of the local jurisdictions, maybe there are local rules that try to protect consumers in some form. But if you hold, they could actually be hindering innovation in a way, because if you close off the crypto industry, that might give the signal that innovation isn't welcome. And that activity moves to different jurisdictions. And what's been shown over the last couple of centuries is the countries and jurisdictions that adopt the latest technologies and weave it into their society, into their economies the fastest, happen to be the ones that perform the best.
Yeah, that's a very, very important point. I mean, I'm just thinking about everything that has happened with COVID and how the government, the media, the lockdown, it was like a complete shock. And the only information we got, they were from, yes, the internet, but, Twitter, Facebook, other social media and television. And I mean, it is a lot of control, and then you get to the stage where you don't know what's right, what's wrong, and you're being told to do things, and you actually want to see the truth. And maybe the ability to have a system with complete transparent data and actually fair model, and a model they are running on verification, where you don't have to you can trust. It's not that you always have to say, okay, fine, I'm just going to do what is told. I think that's a very, very important things, and quite disruptive. So coming back to Ocean, do you maybe want to spend a few words about Ocean token, because we haven't talked about, and I think it will be important also just to mention that as well, just to give a full overview of the project.
Sure. The Ocean protocol is this decentralized protocol that lives on Ethereum or any other L2 technology. So it's essentially smart contracts. On top of the smart contracts, we have the Ocean market, which is no more than we call it a reference implementation. It's a marketplace that sits on top that exposes all the goodness that's in the smart contracts. We've open sourced all this so that people can take that code and create thousands of other data marketplaces in their specific industry. The way we've seen it is that we're experts in kind of bridging AI, blockchain, and data, but we're not experts in the specific industry use cases. So for instance, healthcare, they might have specific patient protection laws. They might have specific custodian laws on the data and stuff, but they still want a data marketplace. So we give them that core code, and then they can build that user experience on top. And this goes across hundreds of different industries. Now, the Ocean token, how it comes into play is that it is the currency within the Ocean market. And the main value of any cryptocurrency is your own monetary policy. And the monetary policy allows us to put incentives as well as manage the monetary supply in a way to encourage and build an ecosystem around the Ocean community, because we want Ocean to be the default token for the future data economy. Just like Ethereum is the token for kind of general smart contracts in the DeFi space, and Bitcoin is this store of value now, not as much a means of exchange. We think Ocean can be the data economy token. And so if you run an economy, the importance imperative of having your own token in order to manage the monetary policy is critical. And so you can use it for staking, you can use it for liquidity pools, you can use it on the Ocean market to buy and sell data, but then also you can earn the Ocean token if you provide data or a valuable service.
Okay, very interesting. So what's the latest development in the rollout of your plan to grow the Ocean token and work with with more organization, institution, and more people as well?
Yeah, so we have essentially kind of a top-down, bottom-up, and a DeFi angle. Top-down is we work with enterprises to help them understand the data. They have a lot of data, and so we think it's worthwhile to invest the time and effort to bring them along the journey. Obviously, they work at a slower clock speed, but when the rubber does hit the road, we think that can have a big impact. Bottom up, we work with a lot of developers. Critical to this is we have this thing called the Ocean DAO, where we give, I think this month it'll be 400,000 Ocean tokens to a team, 14 or 15 teams. They all building different components on Ocean. And then you have kind of the DeFi space, where Ocean is a first-class citizen in the entire DeFi space. So we're on all the L2 chains, we're in all the market makers. We work with many of the protocols in order to have integrations. And so that as the entire DeFi space grows, we grow with it. And with that, the data economy. And so what we're between version 3 and version 4, where version 3 was the initial release of this compute to data, the Ocean market, all these different components. And we're going to V4, where we're going to have more NFT support. We're going to have kind of a refinement of how people stake on data and buy and sell data and discover each other. And so that roadmap is moving forward very nicely. And we have at least 100 developers now working on the Ocean ecosystem, and we want to grow that to 1,000 marketplaces and tens of thousands of developers in the next couple of years.
Because talking about data as digital assets, that means, I mean, NFTs obviously are a big part of that, but what will be other data? What would you refer to as other data as digital assets?
I think streaming IoT data. So all the sensors that are on the phone, the car, in the environment, around the city as you walk around, in the buildings, all this data essentially gives you a reality of what is happening. And you had mentioned COVID, and people didn't know what to believe anymore, actually. When you have all these sensor data that is going to being made available, you actually have something that I don't think people feel that we've had for the last 5 to 10 years, and that is a source of truth on what is the reality in the ground, the environment, the traffic movements, whatever. And I think that that is a fundamental basis on which we can start making decisions. We can have different interpretations of the data, but we all work from the same fact base. And I think that trust in the fact that we're working on the same fact base has eroded in the last 5 to 10 years for whatever reason. And I think that blockchain and all these IoT sensors and data can hopefully bring some of that trust in data back. And so the data is everywhere. It's everything and everywhere around us, just like the internet signals, the radio signals and such like that. And I think it's hard for people to get their head around because we're at the early stages. I think in 5 years, it'll be a different thing where just like if you don't have Wi-Fi, you feel like you don't have water. And if you don't have kind of visibility on the data that's being generated in 5 years and the monetizing of the data that you're able to do, that you'll feel something is missing. So in 5 years, imagine you've been made aware of all the data that is around you and all the data that you generate. And then from one day to the next, for some reason, that data feed is cut off. Like, where's my data? What's happening? What's my biorhythms? What's happening with my entire body and the environment around me? I think we'll have the same kind of feeling that something is missing in 5 to 10 years, and good or bad. But I think that you're going to be able to have such a fine-grained knowledge of the environment around you that it'll be like breathing. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, perhaps, as you said, maybe the key point to start with is actually this awakening of everybody to understanding my data are variable and data are out there already. It's just the current infrastructure is too old and is not channeling them in the right way. So we can't have trust because we are trusting centralized company, third party, we are trusting other people. And you have a vision of the world and what is happening that is not accurate. And that's it can lead to manipulation. This is, the really scary thing, I think, particularly with what is happening really.
Absolutely. It all starts from having the base of facts that we can all rely on. So, for instance, I'll just bring an example. In the Black Sea, I believe that there was a Russian and British battleships. They met up, and then the Russians fired warning shots. The British had one story, and the Russians had a different story. So if you actually had sensors, cameras, satellite imagery, and all that sort of stuff in real time, then people can have different interpretations on why things happen, but what happened would be indisputable, right?
What's about failure of data transfer?
Excuse me?
Failure of data transfer.
How do you mean by that?
I'm thinking about energy is basically powering all the transfer of data now. What about if there is a situation where there is a failure and then that poses a question about, data transfer stops. Is that a scenario, or is just something like I may be thinking too much?
It's a good question that we're going to have to deal with in a while. But it's just like if the internet shuts down, or a server farm like Amazon server farm goes down, or somebody accidentally cuts through an undersea cable, which has happened in the past, then of course the information flow stops. The good thing is that the data is still being collected at the source, and it can be transferred later. But of course, that real-time information sharing particularly for financial markets, would stop. And then, of course, those guys can run their algorithms on the streaming data. Yeah.
Yeah, I think also for healthcare as well, as we are thinking about, data can really change the healthcare system. Maybe you are a surgeon, you are making an operation, and in the same, room, you can have access to kind of like streaming data of another operation somewhere else, or be in a conference call. And that has to be, they are very complicated data set. It's not something that, you can do on a video and zoom in and out. I'm just thinking about all these like crazy things that, definitely finance, but also healthcare, as you mentioned as first example, they are very, very good use case. Bruce, listen, that was a very interesting interview, and it's so exciting what you're working on. And yeah, I understand there is a lot, to do before we get there. It might take, quite a few years or maybe decades, but we are in the journey, and that's amazing. And it was very good to have you on the show.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right. That was a very interesting but quite deep interview with Bruce. I mean, data is a big topic now, and something that is ripe for disruption. Now we are trusting somebody else with our data, and that's has to stop, is going to stop, because the world is moving in a different direction where empowering people is more important, is a priority. In a decentralized Web3 world, trust is built without discounting security and privacy. So if you're interested to learn more, add to Ocean Protocol. If you have any specific question you want to send us, please get in touch with me. And if you are not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please click the subscribe button and follow us on social media to stay up to date with our news and interviews. I will see you next time.